Good afternoon. It is Monday afternoon, and I would like to, as a standard practice, try to give you a little recap of what went on in week two and a little preview of what goes on in week three. And I really want to thank those of you who do watch this video. And if this is your first time watching one of these videos, which I know it is for many, uh, please make sure you continue to do this because there were some things that came up in the past few weeks that could have been avoided or could have been corrected up front if we had been paying attention to the instructions and things like that that are being posted with these. So this is a plea to those of you who may be watching it for the first time and to those who have watched it consistently to continue the practice. It's going to help as we get further. Okay, what went on last week was really good discussion about change and the ability of organizations to respond to new circumstances. And many cases we saw people's personal experiences being mentioned. And we also talked about how organizations are set up to do things. And also, it was the first time we took the paper that you had written in week one and expanded into now a more specific area, which was, again, a little bit more detailed about how organizations work and what they do. And if there's one blanket statement I can make, and I caution everyone against making blanket statements, myself included, but I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit here. One thing I think that we want to make sure we're doing as we're looking at all these papers and situations is make sure you're prepared to spend time talking about not just what your subject organization does, but how does it do it? How is it structured to accomplish what it needs to do? And sometimes when we have some really interesting or in some cases maybe even fun companies to talk about, or ones that we think we know a lot about because they're so commonplace, they're such a presence in our lives that we get caught up in the what they do. Don't forget that this is more about how and how they can do things differently, or how we would like to see things differently, or how we as professionals interpret what they're doing. So that is a major observation. The discussion was really lively. I really appreciated it. And once again, I try to get back and forth with a lot of people. I do read everything. If I didn't read your post, it may be that I have already read something similar. Really, if you have questions about it, talk to me. Write me, request a meeting, anything. Be happy to discuss the process with you. I did make some suggestions into how to do things in last week's video, and perhaps it didn't get out in time, or perhaps people didn't watch it. And watch the video again, go back, we'll avoid some of these mistakes. With that in mind, too, I do want to apologize to everyone for being a little later than I expected to be in the development and posting of grades for both the video and the paper. I mean, for both the discussion and the paper. This is because, as I mentioned very first week, this is a brand new version of the course. And as any brand new version of anything, things sometimes don't always go exactly as planned or anticipated. And unfortunately, we found a few settings were off in the discussion board and the provision of the rubrics and tying rubrics to grading, and just a whole bunch of little technical issues that came together and caused a delay. We've gotten those fixed. I apologize for the delay, and I think I'm going to be safe in saying it won't happen again. But as I just mentioned, it's new, it's different, and sometimes things just don't work the way we want to until we find out how the real live version is going. With that in mind, this week we're going to present a very interesting topic. One of the most interesting topics, I think, in a whole thing of organizational studies, and that's culture. Culture is such a driving force. A very prominent author many years ago, and there are different versions of this quote, but Peter Drucker has supposedly said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And it's true. Culture determines so much of how we do things and how much we as individuals behave as members of groups, and therefore how those groups behave and affect the results negatively, positively, towards what we wanted to do, maybe taking a different direction. there's so many factors that come out of culture, and culture is a driving force. So you will, I think, see directly and clearly how this week builds on week 2, because some of the changes we talked about in week 2 were a result of culture. We saw people talking about how some mechanistic systems tried to be applied to what is somewhat of an organic design the other way around. These are the kind of issues we'll see. So here we are this week talking about organizational culture. It's almost the unwritten rules. What happens? How do we do things around here? What is the attitude around here? And by attitude, I mean a more classical definition of an attitude being a habit of thought. What are the habits of thought of the organization that translate into habits of activities and that may be so ingrained they actually govern what we're doing? Okay. Now, another important feature. This week's discussion is pretty standard discussion. This week's assignment is not. This is something we're trying that's something new called an assignment forum. And it's kind of a hybrid between an assignment and a discussion board. So I urge you, when you see that term assignment forum, make sure you read the rubric before you begin to try to do this. It's essentially a very directed discussion that asks you to work with a specific situation from your own experience and develop that situation in light of the readings and resources and in the subject of culture. And then, rather than get into a deep discussion like we do in a normal discussion board, trying to exchange information with as many people as possible, this is choose one other person's post and respond to that with a critical view of what they wrote about and how it fits with your views of culture. It's, as I said, it is a bit of a hybrid between an assignment and a discussion board. We've not tried this before in this course, so it's going to be very interesting. Read the rubric, and if you have any questions at all, please contact me. So thanks for the work you've done, and I'm looking forward to how this whole week 3 progresses with some new touches. Thanks again.